funded by the Broadcasting Authority of Ireland with the television licence fee.
You're listening to Prog.5 of the 5-part series There Is Life After Addiction. Throughout our modern Ireland, many people and groups are doing Trojan work to help people recover from addiction, whether it be drugs or drink or whatever, and live addiction-free lives. One such person is Brother Barry Butler, who nowadays works as an addiction counsellor in Ireland. Here he is to discuss his roots and various life experiences.
I'm based in Knock in County Mayo, originally from County Cork, trained and belonged to a community of brothers, trained in nursing and primary health care, spent my early years working in Africa where I got extremely ill and had to return back to work in Ireland and England. And it took me eventually into working in London in the area of homelessness and addiction. And that was the starting point of my present work.
And Brother Barry, how many years did you spend in London in the work, and where were you working actually in London itself?
I spent roughly 16 years working in London, and I worked out of the community doing outreach work with a number of addiction projects in London, the biggest being the one at King's Cross in London, which was a direct access centre and the biggest in the whole of England. Now, my primary work, or main work there, was to do with relapse prevention, anger management and stress management. That was didn't follow any particular programme there. I worked in 12-step programmes in the East End of London, and I worked down near Croydon and near Peckham in various projects. So that was the extent of my work.
Barry, what are the big challenges in work of being an addiction counsellor?
I think first of all, as an addiction counsellor, one has to have real empathy. You know, it's a case of, there but for the grace of God, go I. If I can't see in myself exactly what's happening to the person in an active addiction, I won't be of help. You know, I have to be a wounded healer, first and foremost. And unless I can be in touch with my own wounds, you know, when people want help, they don't go to the person who's going to tell them what to do. And, you know, the person who seems all together. People want to encounter somebody who's in touch with their own brokenness, their own wounds, and can recognise that in the person they're seeking to help. You know, we're wounded healers. And that's where I have to come from. And as I said earlier, a deep understanding of this person in front of me, no matter what their story is. And in addictions, they take us into all kind of dark places. Cause us to engage in all kind of criminal behaviour of all kinds. It's not because anybody's a bad person. There isn't such a thing as a bad person. There are good people who end up doing very bad things, because one thing that addiction causes to happen in us is that we're robbed of our willpower. We're no longer free. I think I might have said it before, the Chinese have this proverb: a person takes a drink, the drink takes a drink, and then the drink takes the person. And that's true of any addiction, because all addictions have the same root cause and all will have the same cure.
And it doesn't matter whether it's addiction to drugs, heroin, cocaine, alcohol, gambling, or whatever the case may be.
None whatsoever. All addictions are an escape from pain. And actually addictions are used by people as an answer to a problem. You know, it's they're trying to find a solution to a problem. And initially it seems a very, very attractive solution. But in actual fact, what seemed a solution is now a bigger problem than the problem itself. And then a person is utterly and absolutely powerless at that point in time. Their lives are unmanageable and out of control. And they will engage in any kind of behaviour that can help them to feed or numb the pain that they're experiencing. And with that will come a whole build-up, a cycle of guilt and shame. Because people find themselves in situations where they're engaging in behaviour that they would, in their wildest dreams, they would never have seen themselves doing whatsoever. It's not because they're bad people, because they're powerless.
When a person, say, wants to find recovery, what are the challenges in finding recovery?
A lot of my experience in London was that we were getting people of a younger and younger age coming in seeking help. Many of those started at 9, 10, 11 and 12, drinking, sniffing, smoking weed, graduating on to heavier drugs, the newer drugs. And they came in and they really had been robbed of their youth, their teenage years. Sometimes all society seemed to be able to offer them was a week or two detox, 3 months rehab, back to where you came from. And that's the big challenge that we face. It's a challenge facing, when I was in London, that was the big thing. It's everywhere now. It's everywhere. There are places maybe but very small like Chinaklo community who are good models of where people need to live for a number of years.
This is a kind of a community which is based on monastic precepts, which people go through recovery over a period of years, hard work, meditation and good living and good life patterns.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's faith-based, but people, and when you're an active drug user or a gambler or any other addiction, you're not thinking about faith. That's the last thing that comes into your mind. But they will take anybody who is willing to work the programme. And there are across the world new groups like Farms of Hope, which we yet don't have in Ireland, but are about 70 of them across the world. And I think we'll have to have more and more of those communities. There's no way that it'll be possible for governments to finance all the treatment programmes that will be needed. And as I've said, very often they're too short, especially for that particular age group who've been robbed of their childhood and their teenage years. I think maybe we have places like Coonwira which work very well for a huge amount of people. Actually, the vast majority of people who recover do not need residential programs. Actually, the percentage who need residential is probably is small enough. But the most successful program are the self-help programs, and that's the 12-step programs.
And for those of you who may not know, the 12-step program is a set of guiding principles outlining a course of action for recovery from addiction. It's used by the likes of Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous and many other recovery support groups throughout the world. Barry Butler.
It's a life-changing program. There are 3 phases to it that I have to acknowledge first and foremost that my life is unmanageable. Now, and that program can be applicable to any one of us who find that there's a dimension of our life that's unmanageable. People find that their gambling is unmanageable, their food addiction is unmanageable, their alcohol addiction, their drug addiction, their sex addiction or pornography addiction, and whatever the addiction may be, and sometimes actually more and more a combination of several addictions. And even in our own cases, it might be our anger is unmanageable, or our emotions unmanageable. Whatever is unmanageable in our life, that is when we recognize that's the first step. And that's for acknowledging our powerlessness. And that's where the 12 steps say that there has to be somebody greater than myself to set me free. I'm addicted to something lesser than me. All addictions have the same root cause, and all addictions have the same cure. I'm addicted to something lesser than me, and somebody greater than me will set me free. And that's why the huge success of the 12 steps. And the wonderful thing about the 12 steps is that they will take people where they are.
And we'll hear more from Barry Butler later in this programme. Now, another person who's very much involved in helping people to try find recovery from addiction is Billy Mitchell. For many years he's been involved in prison ministry in places like Mountjoy Prison. So what kind of advice does he try to impart?
I'd always encourage the lads really to use this time that they have now to, do the courses, whatever's going on in prison you do. The system like the likes of counselling, that a lot of guys have buried stuff that needs to be brought up. It's really to use the time, because a lot of the guys, we'd say to them, like, outside you wouldn't even look at us because, they're on drugs and they're caught up in that addiction. But in the prison, in most cases, they're drug-free and they're more alert, and so it's a drop in the ocean, but we're just trying to give a positive, to try and change the mindset.
And aside from changing the mindset, Billy also tries hard to encourage the spiritual side of things.
Everybody looks after the body, the physical side, how you eat, exercise, which is brilliant, all very, very positive. But there's a spiritual side there that's not tapped into. And I would encourage that, And I find that a lot of the lads we come across are very open to the spiritual side, because I've just seen, talking to and praying with lads in their cells, whatever, there's a great openness there, there's a humility for, to correct stuff that has happened, stuff they've done, and they do want to change their mindset. And in my opinion, the spiritual side is the real hope, it's the whole body, it's the physical and the spiritual, I think is a crucial combination.
One of the biggest challenges for anyone who finds recovery from addiction in prison is, once they get released, to try avoid the old negative life patterns. Billy Mitchell.
I'd always encourage you to get away. Places like Chinakalo down in country in the west of Ireland, or Sister Concilios in Athy or Limerick, and there's different very good places, Christian and non-Christian as well. But as long as they're looking, I think, to me, the most success rate is people that look at both sides, the spiritual side and of the person and the human side, And I just seen it. It's very, very sad when you see people who've served prison time, they come out and they're full of positivity, they want to get their life back on track. You see their kids that they're separated from, or the different things you hear, and then the minute they're caught in this downward spiral, back into the hostile routine, back into the addiction. And that's one of the strong emphasis we talk about when we visit the prisons is to be be prepared when you're coming out. This is what you're going into, unless you really want to change, and give them the different options that are available. A good friend of mine now who's involved with me in the voluntary sector, and he's not allowed to go into the prisons because his past record, he's been in prison a long time in his life, but his story to me is phenomenal. He was involved in a major gang in Dublin, and life, it just got too much and he went to commit suicide, and before he did, he decided to bless himself before he carried out the act, and he heard a voice saying, don't do it. And this man, from that day, this is going back now 10 years ago, he transformed his life, and he's now helping a lot of people on the streets of Dublin with addiction issues. He's with a group that helps people with addiction, just encouraged him and whatever, and he's transformed his life. To see the difference in him and the zeal he has for helping people and the love he has for helping people is wonderful to see, because he'd spent many years in prison and he caught up in addiction, caught up in the gang, and he'd done stuff that he wasn't proud of, but he's seen the mercy and the grace of God to change, and that's an example of forgiveness, that he was able to forgive himself, but also the issues he had with family where he was able to forgive,
And aside from his work in prisons, Billy also spent several years working in the Morning Star hostel for homeless people in Dublin City.
When I initially came across the Morning Star, which is a homeless hostel in Dublin in North Brunswick Avenue, I was blown away by the generosity of people. These are people, this is a hostel going since 1921. It's for homeless men with the most serious addiction problems. It'd be the cheapest hostel in Dublin, and it'd be very, very basic, just straight dormitories. And for me, initially when I went in there, I was just so impressed with the generosity of members who would give up work, full-time work, to live in this hostel on a voluntary basis. And there was great charity there from the Indoor Brothers. You know, you're talking about sometimes a 12-hour shift, lads getting up at 6 in the morning and just doing the most basic jobs, cleaning, breakfast, you know, washing men. And to me it was very inspirational. And thankfully I decided to give initially 2 years of my life to living in with the men, and I found it the most incredible experience of my life. You know, when you're living with lads 24/7 who have very serious addiction problems, but very good people, not wallowing in self-pity laddering, but they had that heavy cross which I wasn't given, you know. And I had the pleasure getting to know these people, and it's something that I'll always cherish when I look back in life, that, you know, that 2.5 years was just inspirational for me. We dealt with people who lost everything, come from very good backgrounds, and they lost absolutely everything, including their self-respect. But the great thing is, I seen, you know, stories of hope where men who had lost everything, family, possessions, whatever, but he got that thing, that crucial thing back that he had lost, which is our self-respect, you know. And a lot of them, you know, would move on and get on with their life and whatever, and they could be only there for a period of a few months, 6 months, whatever, but in that time it even encouraged us, you know, to see that change, a change in mindset. We'd try and encourage lads that would be struggling with addiction. We'd try and get them into centres like Sister Concilia or the different centres. That was one of the top priorities we would get. We wouldn't want the lads to get complacent and just to be, they were here for a bed every night. But in saying that, we wouldn't judge them because, you know, at the end of the day, it's a very, very heavy cross. But we gently try and, you know, direct the lads to centres that, you know, would help them in that addiction issue. You know, but everybody has a story. I've been with people who, you know, the parents may have died and the brother might have shown the brother on the streets, and then he just has gone from initially just being homeless to addiction and everything else that goes with it. And, you know, I've met people who've lost their wives and they just couldn't handle it and they just went off the rails. You know, everybody has a story, and it was just such an incredible life experience for me to listen and learn from people, not just from experienced members who were there for years working there, but also a lot of residents who had just, you know, stories that some of them are so incredibly harrowing, like, you know, they've gone through so much. It also gives you appreciation of how lucky you are in life, you know, because there's so much brokenness out there, but there's hope amidst that.
One of the golden rules in the realm of recovery from addiction is that it's the person with the addiction who must ultimately choose recovery for themselves. Billy Mitchell.
The choice is crucial. If he wants to change, I can talk till the cows come home means nothing. That person has to have desire to change, to really want to change. And otherwise we're going nowhere, you know. And then when you see that desire, then you can work on it and you can move forward. But it's the person that has to make, okay, my life's a mess, I need to do something different, I want to change. And then from that, you can move forward.
There is a healing, and someone has to open themselves to that healing and say, I want that. I really want that balanced, good life. I can be that way.
People have choices, and it's their life.
Step into the light.
And many, thankfully, have made a positive decision to say, okay, I want to change my life. I'm sick of this addiction.
You make the first step into recovery and accept that you have the problem, and the problem is yourself, and you try your best.
Recovery is in the choice, because it is a choice, but it's your own choice. It's my own choice to get recovery.
There's so much to be grateful for each day.
Due to the rapidly changing nature of our modern Ireland, All forms of addiction are, unfortunately, on the increase. Now, I asked Barry Butler had he any advice for anyone listening in who might be caught up in an addiction.
I know from talking to so many people in recovery, I remember asking a lot of people in London, what was it like? And I know when I was working at King's Cross, and it was a direct access place, all you had to do was walk through the door when the place was open and say, I need help. But I know that there was so much shame and guilt that very often that shame and guilt prevented them. Now, I would say to people, remember, that is not how the person who you're going to see will see you. This is how you see yourself. You see yourself, you're ashamed of your behaviour, you're ashamed of what you've done, and you think in your head that you're going to be criticised or judged, or that this person will see you in a way as you see yourself. That is not the case. I would say to people, you'll be more than welcome in any place. I know that in Ireland now, Conwira has set up a number of drop-in centres. They're independently of the treatment centres. I visited one recently in Ballybuffet in Donegal, and they're wonderful places where you can just walk in and say, I'd like to talk about my problem. And you could win yourself if you are the one who has an addiction or some aspect of your life that's unmanageable, or you may be the relative or the friend of somebody who says, how can I help this person? Or I cannot cope with their behaviour. What is it I would need to do? They're free, and there's people in there. Most of them have been in recovery themselves. They've been through it all. They know what people are going through who go in. And I think
they've walked the walk.
They've walked the walk. And there are many other places like that where people can go in, but never be afraid. Never be afraid. If you went and walk into a 12-step meeting, the people in there will give you a welcome. I have seen people, many of them, with stories beyond belief, maybe from very, very traumatic childhoods and broken lives. You would write them off, humanly speaking. And I have seen those people totally transformed. When we talk about resurrection, that's what we're talking about. What raising from death to life is the best resurrection that anybody could have would be to raise from the depths of an addiction to new life.
And one person who found such new life is recovered drug addict Nuala McCormick, who nowadays works as an addiction counsellor in the Conwira Rehabilitation Centre in Newry, County Down. I asked her what was the best thing about her new life.
It's very rewarding, definitely. You know, to come from a dark, lonely, isolating place to now being filled with so much love for myself, you know, without relying on somebody else or anything else to fill me with that love. Having that love for myself, to be able to give that to others now and help others through their journey. It's so rewarding, definitely to the max, yeah. And each day is rewarding. And seeing the girls come in, when they first come in, and then after about a few weeks in the centre, the whole facial expression's changing, their whole mindset changing, they're learning to go down deeper. You know, it's an amazing to see that. It keeps me grounded as well. It keeps me grounded and not wanting to go back to that bad place again. So yeah, it's very, very rewarding. The programme in Conwira is huge. For, you know, it's life changing. It doesn't just have to be anybody could do this programme, because it's really life giving, and it's not just about coming in and coming off alcohol or drugs or gambling or whatever the addiction may be. It's not just about that. It goes a hell of a lot deeper, as in you're learning how to live and cope with life without needing a substance or somebody or something to help you through life. It's helping you. The programme is set and designed to help you to live a better life and to learn how to cope with life.
Without an artificial crutch, so to speak.
Exactly, an artificial crutch or a substance or a person. It's knowing and finding your own inner goodness and starting to love your own self, because that's who God created us to be, is our own beautiful selves. We have to find our own beauty and goodness, and until we find that, there's no healing.
And staying with Coonware, I asked Nicola Kelly, the co-manager of Coonware Rehabilitation Centre situated in Athy, County Kildare, what she found most satisfying about her work.
What else can you see any happier than a father or a mother leaving this place after 12 or 20 weeks or whatever length of time they stay, holding their kids' hands, hopping into their car to drive out through the gate, and you really do wish them the best, and, look out for them and keep the lines, like we were talking about the families, keep the lines of communication open. I think that is absolutely vital.
Over the last 5 programmes in this There Is Life After Addiction series, we've primarily focused on just a few of the many inspirational stories of several groups in Ireland, such as Coonware, the Peter McVerry Trust, the Chinaclo community and the Irish Prison Services, who are working hard to try help people find recovery from their addiction. What is clear from such stories is that, first, successful recovery from addiction is possible. Second, no addict, no matter how bad their situation, is a lost cause. Third, help exists if the addict is serious and sincere enough about pursuing recovery. And ultimately, there is life after addiction.
Going down the road of addiction is a bad way to go, I needed help. I wanted to stop, but I didn't know how to stop. So I came to the right place and I'm still sober, thank God.
There is help out there.
There are people who are willing and ready to help you, if you pick up the phone.
There's plenty of places within the country that give out support.
Recovery is wanting on a daily basis. It's live and die situation. There's no in the middle.
It's about not fearing reaching out for help at any stage.
There's always hope, Anybody that is affected with addiction can always come out of it and get a better life. I'm a firm believer in that, I really am.
Funded by the Broadcasting Authority of Ireland with the television licence fee.